Good evening. I am going to talk this evening about the book Learning from the Stranger, Christian Faith and Cultural Diversity from David Smith, and just talk about how the situation that is confronted is really Abraham's inability to fully accept God's promise to him and how that impacts him and his life and his wife, Sarah, and really how our inability to see the world as God sees the world and remain God-fearing can be explained through four factors that David Smith highlights. One is the factor of fear, which is the struggle of the unknown, which is perpetuated by our own independent societal beliefs that we can only rely on ourselves. Every business has its own culture, a way of doing things, and a historical context. And that a new employee, a stranger, does not know. And so that in and of itself can create a sense of fear and make people react in a certain way, and we need to be mindful of that. The second factor is that of power. And power is both conscious and unconscious. And some people choose to wield power like a mighty sword, creating a sense of powerlessness in others. However, when you approach the world like Christ, you have a cultural humility, recognizing and truly seeing that there are powerful and power differentials, and allowing others to teach you through that is what creates that humility and acceptance of other people, which is going to keep us Christ-centered and the ability to accept and interact with others without judgment and generalizations. And that ties into knowledge base. And there's an old adage that knowledge is power, but most importantly, there is a need for truthful knowledge. When we approach people with generalizations and stereotypes, then we are essentially stripping them of their uniqueness and humanness of being created in God's image. And so that requires us then to have the fourth factor, which is perspective. Taking the perspective of another is also known as empathy. And when we fail to be empathetic to others or ourselves, we lose God's perspective for our lives. This begins the slippery slope of losing hope and faith. We begin to put limits on God because we look at the world from our own isolated perspective, forgetting that God can use anyone to teach us and to do his will. Overall, I liked the correlation in the teaching. Not being a student of theology, I hadn't heard this perspective before. It was a great reminder of God's faithfulness in our lives and the way that he can selectively choose whom we learn from and who we learn our lessons. Taking into account some of our previous teachings, this lesson is intertwined with emotional intelligence, the need for internal and external awareness of self and others, as well as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, reflecting how out of Abraham's fear, he didn't have faith in God's promise to take care of him. And that can lead to faulty thinking and errors, and that's why it's always important to turn to God first.